The main character of this story is Udamdik, who attended an interview where he was questioned about his water purification methods. He stated that he would employ a specialized purifying machine provided by the government. While discussing his reasons for applying to the organization, he was interrupted by a different interviewer who claimed that his resume lacked any talent. This interviewer also questioned whether it was embarrassing for Damdik to apply to a major corporation without any discernible skills. Damdik inquired as to why the job vacancy had been advertised. In their time, the discovery of dungeons led to the emergence of hidden talents in individuals, which subsequently propelled civilization to advance rapidly. Some viewed this as a beneficial revelation of talent for humanity. Damdik also shared this belief until he discovered that he himself possessed no discernible talent. They informed Damdik that their corporation operates solely for profit and individuals like him hold no value for them. Another interviewer stated that although Damdik lacked talent, he should possess a moral conscience. Damdik became angry and questioned whether they were being discriminatory towards individuals without talent. The initial interviewer responded by asking why he was being impolite towards them. Damdik pondered whether he had made an error. The interviewers continued to express their frustration with people lacking talent and questioned why Damdik did not demonstrate any respect or behave appropriately within their company. After hearing the comment, Damdik became very upset and inquired whether expecting to be treated with respect equated to behaving badly. He then demanded that the interviewers apologize to him. They responded by saying that it should be the opposite because Damdik had wasted their time. Damdik got up and requested an apology from the interviewers, but they insisted that he should apologize first. In response, Damdik stood up once again and produced a recording device. He informed them that their entire conversation had been recorded, revealing their discriminatory statements towards talented individuals and their admission to posting a false job advertisement. The interviewers were taken aback by his actions and tried to prevent him from leaving by promising to apologize. However, Damdik challenged them to repeat their words before a human rights committee and left the room. As soon as he exited, he delivered his report to the Human Rights Committee, feeling contented with it. Unfortunately, he stepped on a piece of chewed gum which infuriated him. While trying to remove the gum from his shoe, he was accidentally drenched with water by a gardener who was watering the flowers nearby. At that point, Damdik knew that his day was off to a terrible start. He went home, only to discover that his neighbors had poured some revolting substance from their window into his room. After cleaning up the mess, he received a phone call from his sick mother, who was hospitalized. During their conversation, she brought up the matter of his uncle's debt. Damdik became enraged and shouted at his mother, admonishing her for discussing his uncle despite his prior requests that she refrain from doing so. His mother urged him to help his uncle pay off his debts, but he expressed doubt that his uncle would repay the debt and suggested that he may have fled overseas. When his mother asked if he was upset, he apologized for raising his voice and redirected her attention to her own health, assuring her that he would handle her medical bills. He then fibbed to his mother, claiming that he was successful in society because of his high educational qualifications. After concluding the call, he stepped outside to smoke a cigarette, declaring that it was the only thing that provided him with comfort. As he lit the cigarette, rain began to pour down, causing Damdik to become agitated and attribute the rainfall to his own anger. He didn't care about the existence of the gods, but he ranted that he didn't want to live his life this way and that someone needed to take responsibility. He directed all of his fury towards God, and at that moment, a strange lightning bolt materialized and struck towards him, further enraging him to the point where he insulted the gods. The lightning became incredibly intense and knocked him to the ground, leading him to believe that he was on the brink of death. As he pondered his mother, feelings of deep sadness overwhelmed him. Suddenly, a notice appeared from the clouds with a floating message above his head that read "Hiring Notice," telling him that the gods were waiting for him. At present, Damduk is feeling furious towards the gods, but they unexpectedly extended a job offer to him. The question remains whether Damduk will accept their invitation or reject it and continue with his unsatisfying existence. Upon arriving at his room, Damduk pondered the existence of the gods, questioning whether or not they truly existed. He had never fully denied or accepted their existence, and after cursing at God, he was unexpectedly struck by lightning. He questioned if the bolt of lightning was an example of heaven's judgment and considered the possibility that those who are struck by lightning typically die. However, to his surprise, he emerged from the experience without a scratch. As he stared at the notice in the clouds, he wondered if it was a status window that only those with exceptional abilities were able to see. Wait a minute, does that mean the Damduk has a talent in knowing to him? Feeling unsure of what had just occurred, he attempted to confirm by uttering the words "status window," but the floating message remained motionless. Confused, he pondered the nature of the notice, wondering if it was something other than a status window. He queried why it resembled a part-time job announcement, and as soon as he spoke those words, the message began to move and mutate, the words on the notice transforming before his eyes. It displayed hiring initially, but rapidly switched to warning, followed by connecting, access, and ultimately load the part-time job list. Damduk noticed that the job postings were constantly changing and acknowledged that in reality, he could only take on a part-time job. Despite this, he considered the opportunity with nothing to lose and decided to give it a try. Therefore, he clicked on the OK button to check the part-time job list. However, the notice indicated that he lacked divine power, which is the energy used by gods. Damduk made the decision to look for job postings that did not require divine power. Upon seeing the job notice for creating the Mirgurd dungeon with no requirement of divine power, Damduk clicked on it and was presented with all the necessary information about the job. He discovered that the employee responsible for the job was named Thor, and the amount he would earn per day was 12 Thor. While the job was intended for gods, Damduk saw it as an opportunity to secure employment for himself. Initially, he thought that creating a dungeon was a risky job due to the presence of monsters. However, the attractive payment package caught his attention. Though he had no knowledge of God's currency, he believed that the Thor currency would be valuable and could be converted to human currency. Filled with excitement, Damduk clicked on the Accept button, and immediately, he found himself in a deserted place. He felt scared at first and thought he was having a lucid dream. Suddenly, a creature groaned at him and almost jumped at him before Thor, the master, grabbed its throat and instructed it to behave well. This encounter further frightened Damduk. Thor then introduced himself as the son of Odin, the god of thunder, boasting about his fame and certainty that Damduk knew of him. Thor's physical appearance was notable, with his massive body, huge mustache, and hammer. Damduk gazed at Thor, wondering if he was truly the god of thunder. In response, Thor looked back at him and suggested that Damduk must be a god from Asia based on his appearance. Damduk concurred with Thor's observation and claimed that he hailed from a small mountain. Thor then proceeded to discuss how he had heard of the god of mountains and their assistance to humans in perilous situations. He narrowed his eyes and asked Damduk why he appeared to be so well-versed in human culture. In response, Damduk fibbed, telling Thor that he frequently went down to the human world to learn about their needs. Thor inquired if Damduk was capable of undertaking the job since the task of creating a dungeon was intended to inflict suffering upon humans. Damduk confirmed that he was up for the job. Thor then asked if Damduk was familiar with the Minotaur's maze, which Damduk is familiar with. Subsequently, Thor presented Damduk with the blueprint for the dungeon and informed him that he would be constructing the maze alongside them. Without any delay, Damdek joined the workforce and began working. As he toiled away, one of the workers, the Red God, warned him to be cautious and avoid falling into manholes or random ditches. In response, Damdek requested that the worker save him if he was ever on the brink of falling. After completing the initial phase of the project, the Red God instructed Damdek to take a short break in the carriage. While resting with the supervisor asked if all Asian gods were as enthusiastic as Damdek. In reply, Damdek informed the supervisor that it varied depending on the god's behavior. They continued chatting until they arrived at a particular location, where the Red God ordered the carriage to stop and directed Damdek to disembark so he could work on the traps at their destination to render them entirely ineffective. While they were on their way, the Red God cautioned Damdek to be mindful of his steps and avoid falling into any traps. He pointed out the trap signs and advised him to keep a constant watch for them. The Red God also showed Damdek 3 additional signs and mentioned that the experience would serve as a valuable lesson for him. The Red God also explained to Damdek that the upper gods imposed tests on humans, while lower gods like themselves didn't have any assigned duties, leaving them to perform tasks like creating dungeons for a living. He also mentioned that the workload was endless since dungeons had to be continuously constructed, which astonished Damdek, who was taken aback by the word infinite. The god instructed Damdek to inspect the room that the workers had built in just a few minutes. Damdek was amazed at what he saw: a massive chamber completed in such a short amount of time. He couldn't fathom how they managed to construct it so quickly. The Red God worker then asked Damdek to set down the box he was carrying and explained that the contents of the box would make the place suitable for the tests of the gods. When they opened the box, Damdek was astonished to see that it contained a simple, round rock. The Red God worker told him that despite its appearance, the rock would spawn spiders, making the dungeon much more challenging for those who entered it. When Damdek saw a creature, he asked the Red God for its name and was told that it was a lizard man. Curious, Damdek attempted to touch a transparent part of the monster, but the Red God quickly stopped him, explaining that the monster had not completed its embodiment and that the area Damdek was about to touch was crucial. They then proceeded to another room, which was the hiding shelter for goblins. The Red God informed Damdek that any human who reaches this point is close to the final destination. Damdek commented on the cold temperature in the area and was suddenly startled by the goblin's sudden appearance. The goblin was just playing around with him, but it still frightened Damdek. The Red God found it amusing and warned Damdek that the goblin's behavior would change once the dungeon was finished. Finally, they arrived at the end of the maze, where a room was reserved for their boss, Thor. During their conversation, Thor entered the room and addressed Damdek as the god of mountains. The Red God and Damdek both bowed to show respect to Thor. Thor had a conversation with Damdek and mentioned that he had heard many positive things about him. In response, Damdek credited Thor's kindness and consideration for his success. The Red God then informed Thor that they only had one final procedure left to complete. Hearing this, Thor was very pleased and commanded that all low-class gods be sent off work. Thor then lifted his hammer in what appeared to be a threatening manner, which made Damdek feel scared. However, Thor assured him that he was not going to harm him and instead promised to give him advice on Asian concept dungeons when they next met. Thor then bid him goodbye. After being transported back to his room, Damdek sat down and took a deep breath. He couldn't believe what had just happened, from being summoned to another world to working in a dungeon for gods. He thought back to the encounter with Thor and how scared he had been when the god lifted his hammer as if to strike. He couldn't help but wonder if Thor had sensed his thoughts about wanting to punish him for lying about being good. As he sat there pondering, a notification popped up on his screen. It was his salary payment for the work he had done in the dungeon. He felt a sense of relief knowing that his efforts had not gone to waste, and that he had been compensated fairly. He clicked on the OK button to check the details of his payment, curious to see how much he had earned. As he reviewed his payment information, he felt a sense of pride in the work he had accomplished. He had faced challenges and pushed himself to meet the expectations of the gods. He knew that the experience had taught him valuable lessons, and he was grateful for the opportunity to have worked alongside such powerful beings. Damda couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement at the prospect of returning to the dungeon and learning more about the mysterious world of the gods. He was eager to see what other challenges lay ahead and what advice Thor would offer him on Asian concept dungeons. Damduk was influenced by what he witnessed, and this led him to the deity's emporium, where he was presented with numerous divine tools that he could obtain with his earnings. He contemplated the idea of acquiring all these items for himself, realizing that it could enable him to excel as a mortal being. Despite his intention to purchase the divine tools, he was unable to do so as he received a notification indicating insufficient funds. Even the least expensive instrument, the Ares Power, cost 70,000 Thor, while he only had 10 Thor in his balance. Damda continued to browse and consider his options when he suddenly discovered talents that caught his attention. He was astonished that talents were being sold and decided to check the prices, only to find that the class talent was priced at a mere 12 Thor, which surprised him greatly given the exorbitant prices of the other instruments. After considering his options, Damda opted to buy the SS class talents, specifically choosing the talent of swords. Once he completed the purchase, he gained the ability associated with the talent. The notification bar informed him that he had successfully made his first purchase and that it was a special deal for the day. Damduk was offered a gift that was of the same class as the item he had acquired. He had many options to choose from, but ultimately settled on the talents of combat. Upon receiving the 2 talents, he was overwhelmed with emotion. After a few moments, he began to experience blurred vision and bodily discomfort. The notification bar explained that this was due to his body being strengthened in order to adapt to his new talents. His lung capacity and muscle strength were enhanced during this process. As he fell asleep, Damduk dreamt of his mother. When he awoke, he was astonished to find a status bar that displayed his name as Damduk, his job as the lowest class god, and his 2 talents as the talent of combat and the talent of sword. He was filled with wonder at the fact that someone without any talent, like himself, could become a god. His phone suddenly rang, and it was his mother on the line. Despite his excitement to share his good news, his mother had different news to convey. She informed him that he needn't come to the hospital or worry about her. However, a nurse who took over the call explained that there was a grave situation unfolding. A dungeon had been detected near the hospital, and they had been trying to reach Damduk, but he was unreachable. Visitors were not allowed until the situation improved. Without waiting to hear more, Damduk rushed to the hospital. Reporters and police officers were present, and they turned people away, indicating that it was a restricted area. At a certain moment, he started considering the possibility that the dungeon materialized as a result of his newfound talent. He informed a police officer that his family was trapped inside, but was informed that access was prohibited due to the maze within the dungeon. Suddenly, lightning struck from the sky and caused Damduk to fall to the ground. Just then, the entire dungeon materialized before his eyes, and he looked up in astonishment, questioning whether it was the dungeon he had constructed. His Damduk's skills are up to the task of saving his mother. And what about Thor? If he discovers Damduk's human roots, what do you think he'll do? If you want the next part, remember to subscribe and hit the like button.